Good afternoon everyone. My name's Claire Robinson. I'm the Customer Relationship Manager here at KRC. Thank you all for joining us for our monthly Agile webinar, which today is about Agile Governance. The slides from today's webinar will be available from our website. Go to AgileKRC.com, click on the Resources tab, then click on Free Downloads. While you're in the resources section of the website, you might want to check out the webinars page where you can access some of our webinar archive and also sign up for next month's webinar, which will take place on May the 9th at 12:30. We're also in the process of uploading our webinar archive onto YouTube. So if you do a YouTube search, you should be able to find these. There's only a couple there at present, but we'll be getting them all uploaded over the next couple of weeks. I'm shortly going to pass you over to your presenter, Keith Richards, but just a couple of things before I do. If you want to tweet about our webinar, please use the hashtag Agile Governance. That's on your screen right now. If you'd like to hear more from Keith about this subject and much more, you can check out his blog at AgileKRC.com/blog. I'd also like to point out a couple of the features of the control panel, just in case this is your first time using the software. So if you have a look in the top right-hand side of your screen, you'll see an orange box with a white arrow. Click on this to maximize or minimize your control panel. If you'd like to ask a question, just type your question into the question box and Keith will take as many as he can at the end. One of the new functions of this software is that we can now see Keith's webcam. You have control over how big or small you want to make Keith's face, so just click and drag the double lines till you're happy with how this looks. If you're watching the recording, don't worry, there's nothing wrong with your screen. You can only see Keith's webcam if you're watching this live. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to your presenter, Keith Richards.
Thank you very much, Claire, and welcome back again to everyone. Again, the feedback we keep getting is brilliant. Keep it coming, no matter how good or bad it is. We always like to learn from the feedback. This is actually our record webinar in terms of attendees, so it's good to see it's continually growing. We get a few people asking, they quite like the name checks, and just going through the attendees, it's everything from Bogota to Beijing today, and I think it's early morning in Bogota, so good morning over there. Beijing a lot later, 7:30 in the evening. And I think I mentioned on the last webinar somebody from Wagga Wagga. Well, they're on again, so a sort of shout out to Helen over there in New South Wales. Great that you're back. So we're going to go, without any further ado, straight into the webinar. And the first thing I want to do, which is the way we play this, is to just give you the information from the registration question. We asked you various things when you were signing up for the webinar in terms of what you thought of governance. You know, do you need governance for an Agile project? And 48%, so more or less half of the people who answered that question, said it is essential. Now, I've been doing this a long time. I've been doing Agile for quite a long time, and this word governance, which I'm going to explain a bit more as we go through and debunk it, it does seem to be a little bit like Marmite or Vegemite. You know, you either like it or you don't. And I'm not sure whether nearly 50% saying it is essential is actually a really good score or a really bad score in terms of half the people, you know, don't see it as essential and half the people do. Now, as we go through the webinar, I'm going to try and get across the message that actually it is essential. It doesn't matter what you're doing, it is essential. Now, 19% said some governance may be useful, and 32% said a fair amount of governance would be beneficial. So I think when you add those figures up, I don't know if you've just done the maths in your head there, but that actually makes 99%. So the great news is we all see that, you know, we need some governance. It's not sort of it's not something that you can really do without. So I think that's very, very encouraging. And as we go through the webinar, I'll be talking about what I call the levels of governance in terms of, you know, what is the right level and what isn't. We did actually, one of the questions or options was, is it unnecessary? And 1% of the people registering, and bear in mind there's lots of people registering, so that doesn't mean one, felt that it was unnecessary. Now, interestingly enough, the majority of those people who said it was unnecessary had the job title of Scrum Master. Now, I'm not going to stereotype anything and say, yeah, if you're doing Scrum, you would eschew or don't like governance. But I thought that was interesting. But again, I don't want to stereotype. As we go through the webinar, you'll see where we are. And I think one of the messages I'm going to get across is sort of governance is a question of degree. So is it a contradiction, or does it actually allow Agile to thrive? And one of the main areas of this webinar is it something we have to put up with? It's a necessary evil. Okay, yeah, I guess we've got to do it. Or is it actually completely different? Namely, no, this is actually something that's really good, it's really beneficial, it's actually a positive. And I'm not trying to put positive spin on it. I'm actually saying that if you've got good governance in place, you're in a very good position to let your Agile to thrive. So let's go a bit further into this and try and explore things a little bit more. In terms of the structure today, in terms of where we're going to be given a couple of definitions to start with, because it's okay saying Agile Governance, but particularly a word like governance means 101 things to different people. So we're going to be looking at some definitions, looking at some combinations. What does it look like? What does it feel like? But also, very importantly, we're going to be talking about how you would govern an Agile project. So if you're in the project management office or PMO, or you're on a board with an Agile a project board on an Agile project, or you're running a company and everybody's using Agile, what do you look for? What do you check for? is it anything different to what we've done 10 years ago? What are the vital signs? And I'm going to give you a checklist to show you how that would actually look. Now remember, by about, and we're talking UK time here, but at about 1:10, which is saying about 30 minutes, we'll have time for some questions and answers. So get ready to enter those into the question box at the right time. So, very brief introduction. We don't like to really plug commercials too heavily at KRC. We know you want the content. Just a little bit about myself and the company. We're very much pioneering. That's why some of the things we're going to say during the webinar might be a little bit controversial, but the feedback we get from people is that they like it. They want us to be told what the truth is, and not just to sort of repeat the sort of message, sort of yada yada, if you like. We do everything to do with Agile, from rolling out to big organizations, all the way down to small teams. We've been doing it for a long, long time. And as you can see, some of the stuff on the screen there is just where sort of I've come from and where KRC's come from. But anything to do with Agile, we can sort you out. I want to start very unusually with this webinar. Normally we get into some definitions, but I'm going to try a quiz on you, and you can try this on your friends as well. So, first things first, in front of you, you should be able to see 3 doors. Firstly, don't take any notice of the colours whatsoever. This is not a psychological test. I just want to set you a puzzle. And this puzzle has come from an American TV show in the 1970s. Now, the way the American TV show, and it was a game show, worked is that the host in charge of the game show would show a contestant 3 doors. And behind one of the doors was a limousine, an American limo, big car. Behind the other 2 doors were goats, and I mean sheep sort of goats, okay? Now, the point of the competition was for the contestant to try and win the car. Now, I want to do that with you now and see, play this game, and all will be revealed as we go through the webinar. So I want you to imagine you pick one of the doors. So pick one of the doors, and I've got to be straight. You're not going to win a car here. This is only for fun, okay? But pick one of the doors. So hopefully you've done that now. And now what I want you to do is what then happens in this quiz, in this game show, is the host is going to open one of the doors that you haven't picked. Okay, so you've chosen your door. The contestant opens one of the other doors you haven't picked, and in that door you can see a goat. Now, what the game show host now offers the contestant is, do you want to change your choice of door? Okay, so that's the question. So I'm just going to run now a quick poll and see how many of you would switch your choice of door and how many of you would stick with your original choice of door. Now I'm just going to go quickly on this one. Crikey, you're voting quick today. We've already got 60–70% in. How many would change their door. Right, okay, it's only a bit of fun this, so I'll explain why I'm doing this later, so please bear with me. But I'm going to close the poll now, and unfortunately I've completely lost my screen. If I share that poll, that is the result that we actually have. Are you going to switch to the other door? 71% of you have said no, and 29% have said yes. Now, I'll explain why I'm doing this in a moment by telling you that the correct answer is actually yes. You would double your chances of winning the car if you did swap to another door. I'll explain why I'm telling you this later, so if you could just bear with me, because it seems counterintuitive, and I know a lot of you are sitting there saying, I still don't think this is true, but trust me, all will be revealed as we get to the end of the webinar, okay? Now, I'm just going to try and hide that and get my... I have a slight technical problem here, just bear with me. I think we should be back with the... for some reason. Just bear with me, guys. Trust me, it's going to come up in a moment. There you go. I think I might have just clicked on the wrong button. We've only been doing this for about 2.5 years. You'd have thought it'd be slicker. Right, let's carry on and see where we get to. Ah, it's gone again. Claire, are you there? Why is it?
I am, yes.
Right, we seem to be okay. Claire, what can you see? Can you see the main slide?
I can see your screen with all of the slides down the left-hand side, including the main one. That's it. Back up.
Right, my profuse apologies. I don't know what's happening, but hopefully I can press something and it won't happen again. Right, what is governance? Let's get going. What exactly is governance? It's a very sort of bland word, and I think it's a very sort of grey word, but it's really, really important. And what exactly is governance? Well, it's about helping people with their investment. If you've got a project for about £200,000 and you need to know where that money's going. You need to know what's coming out at the end of the project. You know, are things going to be okay? When we're on the project, I'm being told various things about how it's going. Is that actually the truth? You know, are people telling me what I want to hear, or are people telling me things that actually, you know, I sort of need to know? A few words that are coming up here in terms of what governance is all about, and this is where things like ownership, you know, who does what, how is the reporting happening, who's helping inform the decision making, is very much about what governance is. So the bigger picture I'm trying to get across here with this word governance is that it is really about looking after things. I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but I often use sort of children as an example here, in terms of, you know, how long would you leave a child unattended for example. So if a child was 2 years old, you know, how long would you leave them, you know, unattended in a bedroom? Equally, if they were 17 years old, how long would you leave them? Now the answer's different. But you need to know, you know, are things okay? You know, am I hearing all the sort of the right information? And governance is very much about looking after things and checking everything is going to be okay. Now that shouldn't be mutually exclusive when it comes to Agile, or whether it comes to a traditional way of thinking. Now, what is Agile then? And it might be worth sort of defining what Agile is to start with, because we can't really govern it if we don't really know what it is. And remember, govern is just a strong word for control, look after, make sure everything is okay. Now, Agile itself is a very broad term, surrounded with a lot of hype. You know, people seem to think it's a thing or a method, but it is a very, very broad umbrella term. It's very sort of general, and by and large, I'd say it's not particularly well defined. I go into some customers and they say we're using the Agile method. Well, there isn't an Agile method. I get people saying we're using Agile Scrum. Well, you know, Scrum is an Agile method, but Agile Scrum is almost like an oxymoron. It doesn't really make any sense. But again, Agile's here to stay. Everyone has to change, and it doesn't matter whether you're a small startup company, whether you're using sort of modern sort of digital technologies, you're working in the sort of digital media. Everyone needs to move on at this moment, and you're going to need to go to Agile. Some of the companies I'm dealing with are very traditional. They've got a lot of history going back over decades, and suddenly they realise that for want of a better description, the delivery mechanism they use has to go digital, and so suddenly they're, if you like, traditional companies playing with the new stuff, and this they find quite tricky. So just some definitions of Agile for you. First off, there's a series of methods, things like Scrum, DSDM, Lean, SAFe is a new one, Scaled Architecture Framework, and things like extreme programming from the sort of IT domain. But again, a lot of this has got quite a bit of, if you like, IT as they're sort of almost ingrained in it. Perhaps DSDM is the only one there that, if you could say, is really quite neutral in terms of, if you like, a project approach. It's not just IT, it's for any project. Various techniques are around there, such as user stories, stand-up meetings, time boxes. I go to lots of places and people say, yeah, we're doing Agile, we're doing stand-up meetings, we're doing sprints. Well, these are just techniques. And when you come to sort of apply governance to Agile, do we just make sure the techniques are being applied correctly, or is there something a lot bigger than that? Is there a bigger fish to fry? And this is why, I'm quite happy to give a bit of a plug to some of the work we've been doing at Mars, and a lot of work going on in terms of looking at what I would call the behaviour side of Agile. It's okay getting a stand-up meeting to work, but how's collaboration working? How's self-organising working? These sort of things like empowerment and such like. And this is why when I talk about Agile governance, what you need to be thinking of is how do I check this stuff is okay? It's very easy to pick up a user story and look at it and examine it and say, yes, this one's quite good, or this one isn't so good. But how do you examine and audit something like a behaviour? Is someone a team player, or is there some baggage going on? So another thing is context in terms of, well, where is this Agile? Is this Agile just operational? Is it for projects? Is it IT? Is it not IT? And this is why when you're, in terms of your governance, you need to understand the context of where this Agile actually sits. So when we're trying to sort of look at Agile governance, the first thing we've got to do is work out what we're looking at, what we're dealing with, because we can't just say, let's sort of look at the checks and balances and controls for Agile, because it's a very big thing and it comes in many different forms. Now I'm just going to show you a list now of things, and if you'd like to sort of play around, just an experiment to get something from the webinar, you can more or less score yourself out of 10 on this and see how Agile you are. So you're going to get a series of characteristics that at KRC we've spent a lot of time working on this, and we define as, this is how you can tell if you're really Agile. But at the end I want you to think, well, firstly, how good are we at all of those? And secondly, how do we apply governance to them? Because some are easy and some aren't. So let me quickly take you through the questions you need to answer, if you like, in terms of, well, how Agile are we? Well, first one, is there autonomy and empowerment? Can people self-organise? Are people trusted? Will people collaborate, or is there, silos and a little bit of turf, and we're CCing a few people on a lot of emails? How is the communication? Are we spending a lot of time with email and document-driven communication, or is there a lot of face-to-face, a lot of breakout groups, a lot of, if you like, team boards on the wall and huddles of people talking around it and a lot of conversation? What about flexibility with scope? At the heart of Agile is the concept that we're going to play with the requirements. We're going to move features in, we're going to take features out, because there's a bigger picture that we're trying to hit, and we do this by playing with the scope. Are we iterative and incremental? And if so, how much? Can we deliver monthly or even weekly? And remember, a lot of organizations at the moment have got their Agile to such levels that they're dealing with daily deliveries. So how Agile are you? Or is it really quite linear and quite waterfall? And one quick tip I'd give you here, which we see a lot, is a lot of people say, yeah, we're iterative and incremental, and when you analyse it closely, It really is just a phased waterfall, maybe a 2 or 3 phase waterfall approach, and it's really very linear. What's your environment like? Now this sounds a bit bland as a question, but what's your tool set like? What's your collaboration software like? Are you in an IT department with a lot of old legacy code? How conducive is the environment you're working in? And I work in some very progressive companies with open plan offices and sort of meeting areas, and it's almost like a sort of village feel to the organisation. Whereas I meet other organisations where everyone's in offices and locks away, and they don't really talk to each other much. A big one here is that everybody could say they're agile and they could be doing a lot of agile things, but do you accept the philosophy fundamentally of what is behind agile? So again, another question about how agile are you? Now in terms of those questions then, so you can see there's sort of like 7 questions there. You could mark yourself out of 10 on all of those 7 and have a look and see what number you come up with. So if the prevailing feeling overall, and you don't need to get yes to all of them, it's not binary, then you can be certainly on the way to being agile if you're scoring higher than lower. And remember, like I say, agile's not a binary condition. It's not we are, we aren't. This project's agile, this one isn't. Don't go into that way of working. It's a question really of degree. And as it says, yeah, well, we're agile. It's a question really of how much agile you are, and therefore this is the key to defining what agile is. Now, the reason why we're sort of going on about this agile and working in an agile way is I think a lot of things have changed in the world recently. Let's say over 5 years ago, I don't think agile was mainstream. And now I think it is mainstream. Everyone has to change. Everyone needs to look at what they've got to do with this agile stuff. We have customers who are incredibly mature with their agile. They've been doing it 8, 9, 10 years, and we're getting calls every day from people, just more or less, hey, I've got to look at this agile stuff. What is it? We got some guys doing Scrum, but I think there's a bit more to it. We had a customer recently. They bought some books, had a go, and straight on the phone going, hang on, what is it? How do we do it? And every time we go in and explain what it is, there is surprises. They didn't realise how much there is to it. And the driver is the fact that life has moved on. Now, if you look at some of the brand names there on the screen, I don't know how many of you will recognise them all. Facebook, obviously. But Facebook is delivering a live new version of Facebook, if you like, every few minutes. There isn't a version 9 of Facebook. There's just a build number. And this idea of working this way is why we've sort of moved to a different way of working. I don't know how many of you know the Easy hotel chain. Certainly EasyJet, a lot of you might know as a budget airline, certainly based in, say, Europe. But Easy Hotel is, again, another sort of way of working. And the reason I'm using that example is it de-scopes everything you could possibly think of from a hotel room, apart from what you need to have in terms of what are the essentials. So you don't get a cup in an Easy Hotel. You don't actually get a window unless you pay for it. It's one of the most smallest things you could be in. I think there are 2 hooks on the wall. That's it. No wardrobes. It's just the simplest thing you can get. And what's happening in life is we're moving to a place where we're looking for the minimum thing that would work. Now, that doesn't apply to all projects, but what I'm saying is if you're looking at features and scope, you need to be saying what is the minimum we need to deliver, and you're looking at features and features. And the impact on governance is that that's the main event you should be looking at, as opposed to time and cost. Now, when I say as opposed to, I don't mean time and cost are now irrelevant. I just mean the main game is what does this thing do? Not sure how many of you will recognise the yellow logo there. Normally it's about 5%, but that is something called Snapchat. And a lot of people, if you do recognise it, it's a good sign that you might know some young people. But Snapchat is something that sends picture messages that disappear after 10 seconds. And you might think, well, that's completely useless. But I'm going to tell you the answer in like 10 seconds, but how much do you think that company would be worth in terms of value? The answer is actually $5 billion. So if there's something that most people haven't heard of and it's worth $5 billion, you can see that there's a fast-moving world out there. The world's now a different place, and the key thing I'm trying to get across from this slide is we need to be quick. And when I say quick, I don't really mean fast. I don't mean we've got to hurry. We've got to hit deadlines. We've got to be timely. We've also, at the same time though, we've got to protect the quality. There's no point being fast and it's buggy. It's fast and it doesn't work. We need to be timely while protecting the quality. And this is why when it comes to governance of Agile, if Agile is now trying to solve this problem, we can get in on time, the quality's good, well, something's got to give, and it's normally things like the requirements and the features. And this is why the governance needs to look in a different place. Not a completely different place, and it doesn't need to look, you know, not where it was looking before, if you excuse the double negative, but things are changing, and therefore Agile governance brings with it different things we need to check. We also need to be responsive. If the market's changing, you know, what is our feedback time from the customer? There's some brilliant work that's gone off in Lean Startup, and this idea of shortening the feedback loop with your customer is quite powerful stuff. Think about all your organizations. How quickly can you build a product, put it out in the marketplace, and get some feedback from the customer to say, yeah, I liked it, or what about this? You know, what is the loop there? You need to be responsive. But again, from a governance point of view, how do we check that feedback loop? And another thing we need to be aware of is opportunity cost. If we are overrunning by a month or two and we overrun another project by a month or two, well, we end up sort of what's called shifting to the right, and the cost of delay ends up impacting our organization. Whereas if we were hitting deadlines and giving 80–90% solutions, but they were on time and the quality's high, we're going to find ourselves in a much better place. Now I just want to run the second poll now with a slight amount of trepidation, because the last time I ran a poll things went a bit funny. So here's another poll that's coming up on your screen. And I just want you to answer this question in terms of, you know, what's most important to you. And I'd like you to pick two, please. If you only want to pick one, that's fine. If you'd like to pick two, feel free to pick two. Try not to pick any more unless you desperately want to, but then that might skew the results. So in terms of two things to pick, got about 2/3 have voted now. I'll just give it another 10 or 15 seconds. Right, excellent. I'm now going to click on close the poll. The reason I'm commentating is because I dread this thing going blank. And I will now share the results there because they make a very interesting reading. So now you can see the results, and one of the feedbacks we get from everybody is it's nice to see what other people say and other people think, and this is very much one of the reasons for doing this. So the top score there is protecting the quality of what is delivered, okay? 70% have talked about hitting deadlines and being on time. But the other two are not insignificant, but much, much lower. So only 1/3 of people think keeping to budgets and costs is that important. Now, I know why people, I don't want to misread that. That doesn't mean to say money is no object. It just means the other two are much more important. But look at how low the score is for delivering everything. 10%, 1 in 10 people think that is. And it might be on a project-by-project case. It might be you've got something where actually it's safety critical, or something's always got to be there. The one thing I would say, though, is I'd always try and challenge that. I think you'd be surprised how many times you don't actually need to deliver everything. And this is where Agile and, say, prioritization, particularly Moscow prioritization, is very good at trying to get to the heart of that sort of thing. Okay, but from a governance point of view, can you see where we would need to, if you're a project board or a steering committee or a project management office, can you see where really you need to be investing your time and you need to be investing, if you like, your focus? As I say, I'm not saying money's irrelevant, but if only 1/3 of it is really money is not the biggest thing, it might be as well to focus on other things. And again, the classic mistake to make would be to make sure all the requirements have been delivered, because invariably they won't be, and only 10%, if you like, is the figure on that one. So let's get back to the slides, I hope. So we do need good governance. And a quick analogy, and some of the regulars will be familiar with this sort of example here, but if you look at the two airplanes, a jumbo jet is a very stable airplane. It sits in the air, no problem at all. It actually finds it quite difficult to turn. It's very difficult to turn a jumbo jet because it's stuck in the air. It's almost literally stuck from sort of an avionics point of view. Whereas the plane on the right is very agile. It's got short, stubby wings. It's inherently unstable and actually won't fly. If you try to fly like that without the computer on, it won't actually fly. It's not actually aerodynamic. Whereas the 747 would at least glide for a long period of time, and you could make a successful landing. But in terms of this idea of governance, the point I'm trying to get across here is, with agility and this idea of being adaptable and flexible, do we need governance? Well, you probably need more in many circumstances. So if you're going to be a fighter airplane that can twist on a dime or a sixpence, you're going to need the governance. And this is why Agile and governance, shouldn't be seen as mutually exclusive. It should be seen as, well, how do we get this to work? What do we need to look at? Because we need to look at it, and we need to look pretty good to make sure this is safe. So enough of sort of, yes, we need to, and trying to make the case for governance. Let's have a look at a few things that specifically I'd want you to look at to say, well, are we doing this? So on any project you're working on at the moment, you might be able to say, yes, we are, no, we're not. You might be able to tick these things off or not. So hopefully you'll find this helpful, and you might start to look at what we can do. So first one is the business case. Is the business case an agile business case? Is there flexibility in it? Do people realize you might not get everything? Is there a sort of best case, worst case, expected case? Is there some flex there where, okay, we haven't delivered a couple of things, and okay, we're only going to make 0.9 million and not the full million, but it's still good. It's still good to go. Or is it a black and white, yes and no? There's a point value, because that doesn't really tie in very well with the sort of the agile way. Because remember, we might be delivering something slightly different than when we set out. What about this really simple statement? Does everyone, for example, a project board or steering committee, do they understand we might de-scope 10% of the project in order to get in on time, which you guys have been saying is quite important, and in order to protect the quality, which, again, you guys are saying is quite important? But is that accepted, or is that, when you talk to someone, do they glaze over? You might get a 90% delivery of the features. Everything delivered is going to be well tested, well documented, and well designed. But do people get that? Because if they don't, you're in trouble. What about the funding mechanisms? I was dealing with someone yesterday. Sorry, not yesterday. It was about 2 or 3 weeks ago at a conference from the audit office, the NAO, National Audit Office, and they talked about drip feeding funding mechanisms. So you might agree, say, 2 million for a project, and you release the money in tranches or slices. Now that to me sounded like an agile funding mechanism. That sounded to me agile thinking, and the governance was in place. And to simplify it, it would be a case of, well, we'll give you another 100K as long as what we're seeing is making us have a warm, fuzzy feeling about the fact that things are going okay. But that, to me, was someone thinking with an agile hat on to make sure that agile can actually work and agile can actually breathe. Now, a favourite area of problem, and I have to say it's normally one of the most tricky areas, is actually procurement. Is your procurement function, when it comes to agile and working this way and governance, is it all just about money and I want everything in the spec? Because if it is, that will be an energy sapper. Just by pure coincidence this morning, I was talking to someone from a procurement department about agile, and they were quite, I can't remember the word I used, from pragmatic, I think is the word I used. And if you've got someone in a procurement department who understands, yeah, we need governance, we need controls, yeah, money's not limitless, if they get it and they understand the agile thing, you're in a very good place. But I have to say, sometimes you can convince 90% of an organisation and one area just doesn't get it, and sometimes that area is procurement, and it can be a major blocker because the governance they're providing is in the wrong area. They're just blocking something that for you isn't really a problem. What about your decision making? How timely is your decision making? did some work with Barclays a while ago, and we had a big situation happen when the sponsor needed to make a decision within hours, and it was a big decision in terms of change of scope, in terms of because something came out of left field. And the sponsor made the decision within about 4 hours, and it was really impressive because she understood that Agile needed responsiveness and quick decision making. There was no way we could have existed if it was, yeah, we'll come back to you in 2 weeks when we have the next steering meeting. It just wasn't an option. So the timely decision making was pretty good. There's a line there saying the honest protection of quality. Sounds a bit verbose and a bit waffly, to be honest, but are we really protecting quality, or are we rushing and compromising the testing? One expression I used earlier on this slide was, are things well tested, well documented, well designed? But can you see from a governance point of view, something like design, do we go and look at how well the thing has been designed or ended up being designed? Do we have a read-through and go, oh, let's have a little look, and whether it's IT or not IT, how has the thing been built? Because if it's been built badly, it will mean your cost of ownership going forward is going to be very high, as it's not easy to maintain. It's no different to doing a DIY job at home. If you do it well, you haven't got to keep revisiting it. But if you do it badly, there's a problem. But this is where governance comes in. Have we been told the truth? Is it really where it is? Have we got it to the right level? But remember what I said earlier. There's some fun bits and tricky bits. How on earth do you audit behaviours? You can. It's the more advanced areas of Agile, things like competencies. Again, a question for you. Think about the competencies your staff are judged on at, say, I don't know, a quarterly pay review or a yearly pay review. What are in the competencies? What are people being judged on? Because if they're not Agile behaviours like collaboration, team player, that sort of stuff, then why would they behave in an Agile way? Because again, if you're auditing or checking the wrong things, you'll get the wrong behaviours. Is your sponsor switched on? Are the lights on? The example I gave earlier, very much a switched on sponsor that was great. And I don't wish to get too technical, but that line is quite powerful. If you've got an assurance function, which you should have, and it has many forms, but does your assurance function understand what Agile is? Are they assuring and checking that yourself as a sponsor or executive are getting the right information coming back? Again, the comment from some of the Scrum people, we don't need it. I don't know whether people see assurance as something they don't understand, but assurance is, if you like, a second pair of eyes on your project to check you're being told the truth. So if a project manager is saying to the sponsor, yeah, everything's fine, who's checking that information? And I don't mean spies or secret police. Assurance is very much a help function. It's not an audit function. But again, are you being told the truth? So how do we handle this contrast? How do we actually get these two things to work together? And it might look that they're oil and water, but in truth they aren't. It's very much a case of getting these two things to blend and getting the synergies. So when you're pulling this together to get your governance, you need to, if you like, take the good bits from some and maybe marginalise some of the bits that don't really work in sort of 2014 and work in the age that we're in terms of fast delivery of projects. So from a traditional way, and I know from the research we've done with the webinars, we're pretty evenly split from where you've come from in terms of your background. But from the traditional project management point of view, the first thing you've really got to do is lighten up a bit. Command and control, heavy documentation. It might be that's the impression things like PRINCE2 give, but actually it doesn't have to be that way. You need to move away from things like fixed and detailed requirements early on in your process, fixed and detailed estimates early on. And the irony is that you can have fixed and detailed requirements and estimates early on if you like, but they're going to be wrong. They're going to be inaccurate. They're not going to be totally wrong, but you need to let the detail come out later if you're working in an Agile way. So for example, if I was auditing a project and at the very early stages there was detailed requirements, I'd say, sorry, that's not safe for an Agile project. High-level requirements, fine, but detail early on, that would be something that governance would step in to say, I don't think we need this. What about your contractual situation? If you have got something where they're all must-haves and it's all in detail, you're where you are, but it's not a cool place to be. That is in this day and age, it's not a situation that you want to be in terms of knowing exactly what it is at the outset, because that's not possible. You may know roughly, but you won't know exactly. And is it command and control? Do people in the teams do as they're told, or do they self-organise and make decisions? But the ones you need to keep going with in this bigger picture, the traditional way, we need a business case, things like management stages to check the business case is okay. Certainly this idea of exception management at the board level, something promoted by PRINCE2, the idea of letting people get on with it, but giving them a boundary, telling them that if this happens, you know, I need some information. But actually good old-fashioned project management and project managers can provide a lot of value add to working in this agile way. A lot of agile people think we don't need project managers anymore, but I'm afraid I don't agree. So what do we need to do from the agile world? We've got to be a bit careful. We don't want the sort of lunatics taking over the asylum. We don't want it to be sort of techie-led. We have got to be a bit careful. But things like prioritization with Moscow, the idea of time boxing and making sure we hit deadlines, going visual, a lot of modeling, prototyping, show and tell. This sort of stuff is very powerful in terms of the sort of agile context. But again, from an audit point of view and a governance point of view, how do you know it's happening? Is it self-organizing, or is it something worse called self-direction? Are the team deciding where to go? That's not good. We need them organizing how they're going to get to a point. But again, this is where I'm saying with things like governance, do they know where they're going? Have they got clearly defined goals? But normally Agile's a lot more fun as well, and this is where, but there are some hang-ups with Agile, things like a single product owner, a single point of failure. It sounds very attractive, but only on small projects do I know that that actually works. And I almost would say they're not even projects, they're more what I call product development. If you've got a big complex project and one single voice of what the customer wants, it's easy to manage, but it often holds more problems than it solves. Starting with a backlog. A lot of people think that's where a project starts, but again, from a governance point of view, if I found a project working and they've just started up from a backlog, I would only probably think it's okay if it was 2 or 3 people working on something small. If you've got anything substantial, you need to start with a good controlled start, and again, this is where governance come in. Did the start happen? Was it a good start? Are we safe to proceed? There's a lot of things happen before you get to a backlog. And be careful when you look at things on YouTube with lots of people going around in dungarees and singing songs about how fantastic Agile is. You do need to, I don't know, you do need a bit of control in there. As I say, self-organize is good. Self-direction, that's another thing altogether. Now, in terms of where you go, I just want to put one slide in here in terms of how to make it happen, and I'll go quickly on it only because it's a slide that you might need to reference. And this is really about if you're looking to get more agile governance or improve it or change it, you know, have a look at where you are and where you want to be. What is realistic that you can do in, say, the next 12 months? How are people using Agile at your organization? Are they dipping their toe in? Is it a big rollout? Because this affects, as I say, how you would go about your governance and rolling out governance. Remember, this is a journey. How are you set up at the moment? Are you just looking to bring this into IT, or are you looking to bring this into business change? At KRC, we always advocate the latter. If you see this as an IT thing, you limit your Agile. But then where's the governance? Is it only in Agile, only in IT, or is it much more wider? And again, if you're going to make this happen, you need a plan, you need an owner, and you even need a business case for it. So you do need to get organised. So final thing, final slide, and I don't know how many of you have been sitting there, and I've done this a few times, this problem about the goats and the car, and I have had lengthy discussions with people, even rows about people saying, I'm afraid you're wrong, Keith. Well, I'm not wrong, and I'll explain why in a moment. But there's 3 things I want you to take away from this webinar. They're slightly random, but there's something I want you to sort of think about in terms of where you go with your Agile. And the first thing is to put scope or requirements or features or functions, whatever you want to call them, put them center stage. If you start working with them at the center of your projects and put the governance around those, I think you'll find you're in a powerful place. Don't sort of have a hang-up on time and cost all the time. Get into time boxing. It's one of the most brutal things. We try to get organizations doing this as quick as possible because it just teaches you I don't know, the facts of life really. It's a bit like riding a bike. When you fall off and hurt yourself, it teaches you that falling off is not a good idea. A customer that I was with only a couple of weeks ago, they've got the time boxing a lot more improved because they now see fast failure as good news, not something that needed to be sort of hidden and smoothed over and not quite written up in the notes. And the final thing, and this sounds counterintuitive, but this is where your governance comes in, is if you really want to deliver more, if you want to deliver more products to your customers, higher levels of service, then why don't you aim to deliver less? And by that I mean, why don't you do sort of 4 projects well instead of 5 projects badly that you need to sort of repair afterwards? So quite literally, if you want to get more from your Agile, start delivering less. Now, you might think that's counterintuitive and doesn't make any sense, but trust me, been doing this for a while and it does seem to work. And you may not know who that picture is on the right there, but it's a person who's called Monty Hall. And it's known as the Monty Hall problem. So what I'm trying to say is some things might seem the wrong way of going about things, but actually you might find it's true. But remember, if you're trying to do this Agile stuff without governance, I'd say that's a little bit more dangerous than it might be best you just, if you like, kept the status quo and did as you were doing before. So have a look at that. Have a look at the Monty Hall problem when you get onto YouTube or Google or whatever, and I think you'll be surprised, because I know there's still 25% of you who still don't think it's the case. But as I say, counterintuitive but true. Right, I'm now going to move to the questions part, and I'll get a slide up. So Claire, if you just want to go through the next slide while I look at what questions are coming in, and I will see if I can come up with some answers. So Claire, are you okay? You there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just do this quite quickly so that we can keep on time. But as I said earlier, the next webinar is going to be in conjunction. We can see you rolling your eyes, Keith. That's one of the great things about your webcam, isn't it? The next webinar is on May the 9th, same time as today, 12:30. We're actually doing the next one in conjunction with the DSDM Consortium. Keith sits on the board of the DSDM Consortium and led the team that came up with the last version of DSDM, and it's going to be all about Moscow prioritization. So everything you need to know about Moscow, if you're using it already and you want to use it better, then join us on that webinar. If you don't know anything about it, it would be a great start for you. So you can register on our website, AgileKRC.com, click on the webinars icon. A little bit about KRC, which lots of you already know. You can find all sorts of information on the website. We have lots and lots of public training courses as well as all the on-site courses that we deliver. There's a couple there mentioned for you, but if you go onto the website, you can find public courses in Agile Project Management, Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Product Owner, Kanban, SAFe, absolutely anything you need to do with Agile. Don't forget to go onto the downloads area in the resources section of the website where you can download today's slides. There's a couple of white papers which I think if you are interested in today's subject you would be interested in as well. One on distributed Agile and one on combining Agile with PRINCE2. And there's just a bit of social media information at the bottom, so do follow us at AgileKRC for any more tips and hints and training offers and all that kind of thing. So I'm going to pass you back to Keith now for the questions. Keith, you need to unmute yourself. It's going well today, isn't it?
Oh, who's in charge of the governance on this webinar? Right, Claire, thank you very much for critically telling me off for overrunning. You're absolutely right. I'm going to go on for another 7 minutes, so apologies to those that have to leave early. And yes, it is a good point to remember your webcam's on when you look at other people in the office and go, whatever. I'm now unmuted, so let's get to some questions. At least you know it's live, so let's go for it. We've got some really, really good questions here, and so let me try and see how many I can get through. Okay, I've got one from Diane here. What is the difference between assurance and governance? To me, assurance is a subset of governance. Governance is this idea of am I being told the right things? Are we in control? Are we looking after stuff? and just the wider things. It's like a board of governors at school, you know, are the uniforms being worn, you know, what is our view on ethnicity, the whole, you know, is it really happening? Now, there's a subset, if you like, a function, like really the project manager should be looking after some things for you, and you can be getting information from different members of, if you like, a project board. But assurance is a nice little subset or a function of, if you like, an independent check on things like the project manager to make sure that all the information, for example, in a highlight report, you know, the highlight report is saying, yeah, well, the features are on track, time's on track, a little bit over on money. How do we know that's true? How do we know that isn't the project manager blagging a bit? So to me, assurance is a subset of governance, and it really is a very powerful, vital role, and I would recommend thoroughly that if you haven't got an assurance function, and it hasn't got to be some big, you know, 5-person department, it just needs who's checking that, who's the fresh pair of eyes is what I often use. An analogy that was used to me once is about what's a tidy bedroom. Sometimes you don't notice your bedroom's becoming untidy, and then suddenly someone comes in and goes, your bedroom's a mess. It's that sort of step change, a fresh pair of eyes. So that's my view on the difference between assurance and governance. A question from Paul: are fixed price projects incompatible with an agile way of working? On the face of it, you'd think so, but the short answer is no. It depends on the structure you set up for your fixed price contract. If you baseline the requirements at a higher level, it means you can play around with the detail. If you agree to engage the customer and certain levels of customer engagement, you know, a day or two a week, it enables you to prioritize. This enables you to hit your deadlines and protect quality. So fixed price will work as long as you put agile method type things in it, and as I say, get the thing signed off and agreed. I have to say, time and materials T&M is a lot better, but yes, you can with fixed price, but you can't with an old-fashioned fixed price. You know, exact price, exact requirements, and the reason you can't, and when I say you can't, I'm going to contradict myself and say you can, but you will get a winner and a loser. Either the customer will pay way over the odds for what they should have, or the supplier will get hammered. And often I get called into suppliers who have just had one of those projects where they wish they'd never won the business. And this is why fixed price you can still use with Agile, but you need to use it in the right way. Pablo, I've got a question from Pablo. What does it mean to put flexing the scope center stage? Shall we not commit to anything in a time box but given a flexible deliverable list? Now, when I say flexing scope, you've got a project scope, and if you like, got when you break it down, you've got time box scope, if you like. But I think the best way, Pablo, to answer that question is to say is to swap the word for the word you're most comfortable with. So when I say scope, other people say features, other people say requirements, other people say functions. It's that you're managing and dropping things out. If you're a bit late and you have a problem, hey, I'm going to have to drop out some of these requirements. That is what I mean by flexing scope. But don't see it all as negative, because if a customer or a business rep comes up with 2 new ideas, they go into the final deliverable. So scope, flexing scope doesn't mean negative. It just means we can pull things in as well as pull things out. I've done a lot of work with the MOD, and they coin the term trading space. They see it as a trading thing, and you know, I quite like that expression. You know, trading in and out. Got a question from Angelos here. So how is governance implemented? Is it one person overlooking the project? Governance really is the layer above the project manager. It is who's in charge of the business case, who's sanctioned the project, and who looks after the project from the various interests on a project. So on any project you will have someone who has just handed over whatever, €200,000, $200,000. You'll have someone who's building it from a technical point of view, and you'll have someone who's going to end up using it, if you like, from a sort of customer point of view. And this is why I'm saying if you have a layer of control that reflects those interests, that would be what governance is. As I say, a board of governors at a school is quite a good analogy. The head teacher, if you like, is the project manager, and the teachers are the people, if you like, actually doing the work. Okay. Razia, I hope I got the name right there. What governance structure would you put in place for extreme programming? I really like that question because it's a good example of where the two can come together and be quite powerful. So if you have a team that's an extreme programming team, which I have no issue with at all, you need to wrap them in a little box so that they are, if you like, self-contained. I don't mean locked away in a cupboard so they don't go anywhere. I just mean they know what their remit is. They're building a block. They're building part of the overall solution. Now, how they work inside that block, how they organise themselves and what they deliver, I don't mind because it's going to fit into a wider scheme. But again, I don't want to disconnect there. If the extreme programming team, should be led by a team leader or they report into a project manager, I need to know what they're delivering. Because the fun and games comes when you've got 2 or 3 teams and they could be using extreme programming or any engineering practice, even a non-IT situation. These teams need to report collectively into a project manager, and this is where I think good old-fashioned project management helps. One of our customers who's on the webinar, I think, got at least 20-25 from this customer on the webinar, and they are into digital media, so they might have a website, a marketing campaign, a branding, TV commercials, all things happening at once with 4 or 5 or 6 different teams. But in the teams, they're at the delivery level, and a lot of them are using Agile and Agile practices, but they need to link into some more traditional governance that's provided by good old-fashioned project management. But good old-fashioned project management is good as long as we understand, and going back to Pablo's point, that the scope is very, very important, and the time's very important, and the quality is very important. So we've got to play this carefully. We've got to accept that when we're doing something, and especially the digital media companies we work with, it's so creative. They have to be responsive. But if you sit there and make this responsiveness slow or difficult to do because you're trying to prevent or control change by overburdening some governance, you create the wrong result. Your governance needs to be light but effective. But when I say light and effective, I don't mean it needs to disappear out of the way, because that's when you get the sort of the lunatics taking over the asylum. Right, we have got so many questions on this one. I think what I'll do is I'll try and cherry pick a few and maybe reply to them personally, just because so many have come through on this one. And as Claire rightly pointed out, I've slightly overrun on this one, which is pretty embarrassing when you sit there saying how important it is to be on time. But I promise I won't do it again. So I'm going to finish for now, and hope you've enjoyed the webinar. Remember, we're going to be uploading these onto YouTube, and you'll be able to get, I think we've done about 15, maybe 20 of these, and they're all going to be free to use, free downloadable, so you can look at them. And but other than that, hope you have a good weekend. I'm Keith Richards, and signing off for now. Thank you very much.